It's the year 2012, a year where you couldn't even go to the mall without getting jump scared by 5 Gangnam Style flash mobs. A year where every gangster and their mama was singing full soul to this one song.
I say,
Your skin was molded, ripped jeans, skin was showing, hot night, we was going. Where you think you going, baby? Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy.
A truly peaceful time. Anyways, you're running home from school. Why are you running?
why are you running?
Today, the new games from your favorite gaming series come out. Your mom picks you up after work and as promised you go and buy the new Pokemon Black and White 2 games. On the drive back home you read through the covers hundreds of times, every time with a little bit more excitement in you. And then, it's time. You start your DS and get greeted with this bang of an intro. Though you skip through it pretty quickly because you can't wait to play. And this shall be the theme that welcomes you before you pick your starters. 3 of the best starters from all of Pokemon. But you of course choose Oshawott and begin to play. Such a small game. 34 hours to beat, but during the next year you live at least 500 hours in this game. Childhood memories. Childhood memories that partially develop the person you are today. Be thankful for them. Though this was more my story and some other people of you might have slightly different experiences, a lot of young adults nowadays grew up with Pokemon. I would be delighted to hear yours, so please write your favorite Pokemon memory in the comments down below. The first Pokemon game I ever played was Pokemon Diamond. In later years I would play through all 4 and later games of this beautiful franchise. Pokemon is truly a timeless masterpiece. The music, the feeling, the memories. But something happened. Pokemon has lost its soul.
I want to be the very best, like no one ever was.
Are you winning, son?
In terms of physical attractiveness, I mean, clearly.
I will travel across the planet, searching far and wide. Each Pokemon to understand the power that's inside.
Let's start at the beginning. Pokemon, short for Pocket Monsters, is a media franchise created by Satoshi Tajiri and Ken Sugimori. It is centered around fictional creatures called Pokemon, which humans, known as Pokemon trainers, catch and train to battle each other for sport. Pokemon is just animal for real. But I am sure you know all that. I assume you also know that Pokemon isn't just a franchise of video games. No, it also includes trading card games and anime, movies, toys and various other things. For the sake of this video I will stick to the games and drift away mainly for my argument's purposes. Satoshi Tajiri created a company named Game Freak, which published gaming magazines. With this he built up some relationships and gathered a small fortune. A few years later Tajiri was contacted by Ken Sugimori, who became Game Freak's illustrator. Tajiri conceived the idea of Pokemon during the early 90s, inspired by his interest in catching insects when he was a child. Ken Sugimori was responsible for the original artwork and the designs of the first Pokemon. Tajiri pitched the concept to Nintendo, which initially showed little interest. However, Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of Mario and The Legend of Zelda, saw the potential in the idea and supported the development. With Nintendo's support, Game Freak developed the first Pokemon game, which became an instant hit in Japan. The bond that was created between Game Freak and Nintendo during this would become one of the biggest partnerships in all of gaming history. First of all, when I talk about the fall of Pokemon, I don't mean that the Pokemon company is on the verge of bankruptcy. It's still the biggest media franchise of all time, growing with every year, but the games are spinning downwards right now. With every release it gets worse and worse. But when did this actually begin? The first Pokemon game was a hit. With the support of a movie and various other media recognition, Pokemon became a household name in many countries. And the trend didn't seem to stop, not even close to that. It actually grew with every new entry. Pokemon was destined to achieve legendary status, and so it did. Everyone knows Pokemon, and the games got better and better. The formula was set, and it worked. 8 gyms, you get the legendary cover Pokemon after you beat the 7th gym leader, and after you beat all of them you gain entry to the Pokemon League. Fighting the keyhole is named top 4, and at the end beating the champ to claim the title for yourself. But somehow each game had a different feeling to it. A point I will explain later on. But when did this formula stop working? We arrived at the point where you have to take on a subjective approach, as there's no specific way to objectively determine when this happened. I would say that the biggest turning point was the console switch from Nintendo DS to the Nintendo 3DS. This was when Pokemon switched from 2D to 3D for the first time since its first release. The games X and Y ran bad though, and got a lot of positive reviews. And it got the coolest Lucario ever. Lucario with a C, the best Pokemon ever. We don't need Lucarios, we got a Lucario.
I can't believe you've done this.
I personally also liked it. Though there was a big change from the 2D to the 3D era, the first step was simple and didn't really completely turn the game around. Now we come to the part where I think that everything went downhill. The dark era of Pokemon. The dark era of Pokemon is what I call the stage we are in right now, and it began with Generation 7 of Pokemon, Pokemon Sun and Moon. Though Pokemon Sun and Moon brought some great upgrades with it and wasn't that bad, there were some trends starting with it, which aftermath you still see in the newer games. For example, just for this video alone, I started a new Pokemon Moon game. Just watch my gameplay until I can freely roam around and kinda do what I want on my own adventure. Yeah, here we go. Not even close. Yeah, get some popcorn, get something to eat. We are going to be here for a while. Yeah. No. Don't even hope for it. Not even close. Yeah, okay, slowly. There we are. 41 minutes. 41 minutes to decide what I want to do. 41 minutes to decide where I want to go. 41 minutes to decide what I want to explore. The great thing about Pokemon was always the fantasy and creating your own story, your own team, your own adventure. Freedom and adventure will always be Pokemon's greatest selling points to me. I love story games. I even made a whole video about it where I also talk about Pokemon. Go check it out if you want to. But if the story gets forced on you where you want to do something different, it gets annoying. The annoyance becomes frustration, and playing video games is, at least for me, meant to be relaxing. So why would I even play something that frustrates or annoys me? These points strongly dragged me away from enjoying Pokemon Sun and Moon, even though the games weren't even bad. A year after Sun and Moon's initial release, the games Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon dropped. The only Pokemon games I've never played in my entire life. This was even shocking for me, but in 2017 when these games dropped, I didn't have any interest in them, even though I count myself amongst the most die-hard Pokemon fans. A year later, the first Pokemon games for the Nintendo Switch released, remakes from the first Pokemon games ever, Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. And I liked them. I really enjoyed them. Game Freak really experimented with this and made something I wouldn't wish for every Pokemon game, but it was a really interesting experience. The graphics were, in my opinion, the best matching graphics ever for Pokemon. Even the models were really matching. A little bit too childish in my opinion, but it's Pokemon, a child-friendly franchise.
Stories go that it grabs the hand of small children and drags them away to the afterlife.
Never mind. A year later in 2019, the Pokemon games Sword and Shield would drop. The first ever Pokemon games that were rather terrible in my opinion. Not unplayable, but every bad thing from the previous experiments were implemented in an even worse way. The games weren't even completed, and the full game would come out a year later behind a paywall in form of a DLC. A trend was showing, and it wasn't a good one. A year after the DLCs dropped, the Generation 4 remakes Shining Pearl and Brilliant Diamond would drop. Generation 4 of Pokemon were my first ever Pokemon games, so I had really high hopes. These hopes would go on to get crushed. The games looked unfinished, and in the chibi style no one asked for. And there's a reason for why, which I will explain in the next chapter. This game couldn't even slightly resemble the feeling the original games had. It didn't even bring its own unique atmosphere with it. It was just there, being a Naruto-type filler episode. A year later, after this abomination was released to this world, the Pokemon Legends Arceus game came out. I had fun playing it, at least for a while, but the graphics, it straight up looked like an N64 fever dream. How did we get this? Zelda Breath of the Wild in 2017 and then this in 2022. But the game in general was a fresh breath of air the franchise dearly needed. The movement was well implemented as well as the open world. Throwing a Pokeball suddenly became a challenge, and this was a great thing. But in the end, it was wasted potential. The world felt lifeless and uninteresting. Something that a certain Pokemon game before brought brought with it. 1 year later, the mainline games Pokemon Scarlet and Violet came out, the most recent games. And oh boy, this guy stinks. This game feels like a white flag. It feels like the developers just gave up even trying. It was and is bad. The feeling of the world being empty is way worse than in the game before. The graphics look even more like an N64 game. I started a Pokemon Scarlet game and in the first 30 minutes I got hard stuck and almost had to restart everything. The game is laggy and looks unfinished. Not only the performance struggles to hit 30 FPS, no, the game is also buggy. You just get stuck or the game just crashes out of nowhere. And this is the current timeline. Pokemon fans are suffering. This was just a small look into the failures of recent times. But if you want to have a deeper look why the games are so bad, the next chapter is for you. So what actually is bad about Pokemon right now? And are there any reasons for it? Did you realize that I repeated myself frequently? A year after Sun and Moon's initial release, a year later the first Pokemon games for the Nintendo Switch, a year after the DLCs dropped the generation, a year later after this abomination was 1 year later the mainline games Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Game Freak made itself a mission to bring out a new Pokemon game every year. I think it's self-explanatory that this brutally shortens the time span of a game's development. This alone can be a huge reason for why a game feels and looks unfinished, or even is unfinished.
Hello there.
I'm not done with you yet. This is also why they chose the chibi style for the Generation 4 remakes. It wasn't because they thought it looked so much better or because they wanted to. No, they had to. It wasn't as time consuming as other graphics. Another point why the games are feeling bad right now is because they don't feel like Pokemon games anymore. And this is partly because of the atmosphere that slowly left the Pokemon games. A reason for that would be the switch from 2D to 3D and especially the new Pokemon models. For example, 10 years back, Tyranitar was one of the most epic and feared Pokemon. Now look at this. Nowadays he looks like a child that asks you if you got any games on your phone. Just give him a dinosaur shirt and an eye patch and now he looks like the average child with autism.
George Bush doesn't care about black people.
The games also look and feel off, because Pokemon wants to be more than it actually is. Pokemon is a fun, small, indie-type, child-friendly adventure game, not the open-world giant Game Freak wants it to be. We don't actually need an open world if it feels lifeless. One day, when Nintendo actually brings out a high-end console for once, you can level up to Rockstar-type Pokemon. But if the current console isn't ready for it, optimize the game for the console, because it's not going away right now. Even though the maps get bigger and bigger, the games feel smaller, and it's also partly because of the lifelessness of the map, but it's mostly because of the map's design. Just look at the map from Pokemon Black and White, or Pokemon Sapphire. Now look at the Galar Regions map from Pokemon Sword and Shield. It's way too linear. You go from one city to the other, to fight in the gym and go through 1 to max 2 routes. In the older Pokemon games you had to walk through these mountains just to get through this route, you then had a villain quest in the city and after that you went back to the city you were before in order to go to the next city and then fight the gym leader. By the way, the villains. Remember when the villains were actually big criminal organizations with billions of dollars behind it? Nowadays they are hooligans, or even worse, bad students. It's just not the same feeling if you once fought one of the most dangerous organizations, saving the world, and now you fight against some bullies. And by the way, just look at this design. And now at this. What is this? There's no world where these are the types of people that bully and not those who get bullied. And it's not only the villains, it's also the new Pokemon designs. Yeah, we also had goofy Pokemon back then, but Pokemon nowadays don't even look like Pokemon. It's just pure laziness. There's also the fact that Pokemon doesn't play like you want it to, but you have to play like Pokemon wants to. Every information is there for you. Everywhere you have to go. There's no excitement anymore. Not the feeling of being 5 years old, stuck in one cave until you finally find out that you can use lightning in order to see the cave and come out. But that's how the children want to play nowadays, and the target audience are the children. These days most 6 to 12-year-old children's brains are rotting away. And please don't even think for 1 second that these children would be waiting 3 days for slight progress in a video game. By the way, I'm currently working on a video about the dangers of TikTok where I also talk about the impact on the children, so this video is more of a filler episode because of the time I'm putting into the other video. Subscribe and hit the bell and stay tuned. And nostalgia. We just aren't kids anymore. This doesn't mean that we can't enjoy good Pokemon games anymore, but time moves on and Pokemon also did. It is currently slowly evolving away from the Pokemon we once knew. And though that's sad, it doesn't mean that Pokemon has to be bad. No, I think Pokemon will get its hold again and find its path of greatness. So let's end this video on a good note. A lot of sad and frustrating things have been said in this video, but in the end, I'd like to give you hope. And if you watched this video until now, you do deserve that. The last Pokemon games, Scarlet and Violet, were a disaster. And we know that. But did you remember when those came out? 2023. A new game just got announced, Pokemon Legends Z. And when will it come out? In 2025. Game Freak did it. They broke the every year a new game curse. They will finally put their time into one game and do it right. And Pokemon Legends Arceus was a great experiment. So another Legends game with even more development time? Don't tell me that doesn't sound promising. I believe in Pokemon. And I also kinda believe in Game Freak and Nintendo. I believe in the community and I think we will not be let down next time. But if we are, I will make sure to make fun of it. Yeah, it's almost 8 AM right now. I just got done cutting this video. Yeah, I really have to get some sleep in because I'm setting off to Warsaw in like 5 hours. I didn't really have much time to cut this video, but I did my best. Hope you liked it. Bye.